are a lot of things that I think about when it comes to keeping my plants actually alive. I've tried it all. I know what works and what doesn't work. So I'm here with my most used plant hacks that I've personally tried for you to try at home to grow the biggest, best garden you've ever grown. Whether indoor, outdoor, or a hybrid of both.
We all love that good hybrid.
Buckle up and get ready for these insanely helpful plant hacks. First, I found out that monarch butterflies lay their eggs on one specific host plant called milkweed. I wanted to grow my own butterflies and watch the life cycle and metamorphosis take place before my very eyes. So I bought a milkweed plant. And I was so excited because after a couple weeks, I saw what I thought to be butterfly eggs on my plant, but then I saw that they were moving, and I realized shortly after that these things were not in fact butterfly eggs, but they were aphids.
But
I figured out a way to get rid of the aphids organically and rescue this plant at the same time. So if you have an aphid problem, here's how to deter them. Grab 2 spritzers. In one spritzer, you'll add baking soda, veggie oil, and a few drops of dish soap. Dilute that in water and get your second spritzer ready. Add a teaspoon of kelp and dilute it with water. Spritz fiercely 3 to 5 times a week, starting with the baking soda mixture and moving on to the kelp mixture
Subsequently.
And you'll only want to spritz the aphids until they begin to turn black and die off. Now, you can also use a glove and remove them by hand, or you can purchase ladybugs and release them onto the plant.
Ladybugs love eating aphids.
And you can do this without the potential of harming your plant with the dish soap. Some leaves may begin to turn yellow and fall off. That's normal. But after about 2 weeks, you should begin to see new growth happening and the aphids gone for good. And once I successfully got rid of these aphids, my plant was deficient in calcium. And you know what's trapped inside of eggshells?
calcium.
It's vinegar that releases that calcium. Well, if you grab some eggshells, crush them up in a little cup, and pour some vinegar over top just to cover the eggshells, about the same amount that you added shells, you'll see that it'll start to bubble and do that dance and begin to create a thick layer over the top. Watch it sizz, and after about 1 hour, you should notice your solution start to calm down.
That's how you know it's almost ready.
When it stops bubbling, you can take a spoon and scoop that top layer off. Dilute it in about 3 gallons of water and spray your calcium-deficient plant leaves. And you, my friend,
Just made a water-soluble calcium eggshell fertilizer for your plants.
what happens is the calcium separates from the eggshells, which is very beneficial for your plants when diluted in water. It can prevent crops from overgrowing, increase longevity and hardiness of fruits, and it provides proper nutrition and absorption. And for anyone who's asking, yes,
It's bussin'.
remember, for this trick, vinegar cannot be used directly in the garden, but it can be used indirectly.
So you don't want to just go pouring vinegar all over your plants. You want to
Make sure the calcium sizzles off your eggshells first. Once I was finished this, I realized, okay, I need a natural organic fertilizer. Well, if you go out to your garden and rake up some of the leaves that fall from the trees, crush them up into fine pieces, you can bring them out to your garden and sprinkle them over your soil. The leaves create a layer of crumbly brown material
or essentially mold.
that breaks down and actually improves the quality of your soil. Leaves are quite rich in carbon and packed with other trace materials that trees draw up from deep in the soil. So when you add the leaves to your soil, they feed the earthworms and the beneficial microbes, and they lighten heavy soils and help sandy soils retain moisture.
Listen, they can even be added to compost bins or used as
An alternative to mulch to make your flower garden beds more attractive. And along the way, I was curious because I heard that if you grab an aspirin and dilute it in water, it helps your plants to grow. I wanted to try it with ADVIL, also known as ibuprofen, and of course I try these things so you don't have to. The results showed using ADVIL on your plants is nonetheless pretty inconsistent in comparison to aspirin. I tried it on my pumpkins and my tomatoes. It did kill my pumpkins.
However,
It helped my tomatoes. So unless the blood thinning effect in humans works similarly on plants for both ADVIL and aspirin, I don't see that ADVIL would really work the way that aspirin does here. Aspirin, or salicylic acid, is said to mimic a hormone in tomatoes which aids in disease resistance. The same is said about the chemical found in Tylenol, acetaminophen, and that helps your tomatoes resist disease. Ibuprofen, on the other hand, the chemical in ADVIL contains acid that flows to the roots and expands to actually slow the growth of the plant.
in my personal humble experience,
But it was worth a try, since there's little research done on the effect that ADVIL or ibuprofen has on your plants. Plus, it's all trial and error. You already know that by now. So if you're trying this at home, I would stick to using aspirin because there's proven research as to how it really works. However, if you want to try what's difficult, you can be a little rascal like us and try ADVIL, but you may kill your plants. If you're doing this at home, just boil your aspirin in water, let it cool down, pour it in a spritzer, and spritz those leaves. It may just help provide accelerated germination, some resistance to disease and pests, and an increased plant size and yield. And as cool as that was, I saw there were so many weeds in my garden and I went to pick them, but I figured, wait, if you go out to your garden and pull the weeds that are growing, you can actually use them to fertilize your plants. Just place them in a glass, fill it with water, and let it soak overnight. After 24 hours in the morning, you'll remove them and just pour that water over your plants. What you're doing here is basically returning the nutrients to your plants that the weeds stole. The weeds compete with your plants,
The ones that you actually like.
for things like moisture and nutrients. So pulling the weeds before you fertilize your plants can help keep the nutrients where they belong.
And where they're needed the most.
So use this method to add an extra boost of fertilizer to your garden beds or plants. As I was pulling these weeds, I was getting ready to plant my tulips. I found out that if you cover your tulip bulbs in baby powder before planting them in the ground, the texture on the bulb creates a physical barrier, so it masks the smell of the tulips that attract those pests like raccoons and squirrels and bunnies. You gotta plant those bulbs real deep in the ground, just make sure you don't break it like me, your garden tool. But using this method helps your tulip bulbs to be less susceptible to root rot, and they'll grow back every single year as perennials, sometimes even changing color depending on the pigment changes down in the roots below. And don't worry about contaminating your soil, as a little baby powder goes a very long way.
But
If you are worried about your organic ecosystem, you can coat your bulbs in a layer of peppermint essential oils and you'll get a similar effect. Now, I did notice a lot of pests next to the squirrels and bunnies. There were a lot of slugs and snails and ants. And I found out that if you pour some beer in a shallow cup, bring it outside, and place it on the ground, the scent of the beer will lure in slugs, snails, and ants. Once they crawl in to investigate, they experience intoxication. However, unfortunately, this method will lead to the ultimate demise of the little squirmers. You can use non-alcoholic beer because the bugs like the yeast in the fermentation.
But if you're like me,
And you don't like to kill the animals, you can alternatively introduce mint, lemon balm, basil, and rosemary in your garden, and that'll help deter them without killing them. They don't like the smell. But just remember, the beer is primarily effective for slugs, snails, and ants, so it may actually end up attracting other pests like squirrels. But regardless, I'm learning about organic and environmentally friendly ways to garden, and I try what's difficult so it can actually work the first time for you. So if you try this to control your pests, let me know. Next to beer, I figured, well, what about wine? And my favorite drink, Inca Cola. I figured I'd do a little plant experiment here to get rid of the tiny pests that were chowing down on my garden. I grabbed some wine, some Inca Cola, and 2 little cups. I poured the wine into one little cup and the Inca Cola into the other. I wanted to see which one the bugs liked better, and after a few hours, there were more bugs in the Inca Cola pool, so it's the clear winner here, although beer probably works the best for tiny little pest traps. And along the way, I heard a friend of mine was feeding her plants Perrier and club soda. And I never thought to give my plants a drink of carbonated water to grow, but I wanted to try it. Well, if you give your plants a drink of Perrier or club soda, they contain minerals that your plants both love and need, like calcium, magnesium, iron, potassium, and all of those things help your plants to grow faster and greener. So use this method once a week and watch your plants grow twice as fast. You'll have to feed them too though, and I tried so many fertilizers and plant foods, I finally found 2 that really work. This is how you make the first one.
and your plants will love you if you do it.
Just grab a blender, add some apple peels, carrot peels, beet, some morning coffee grounds, and afternoon tea leaves. Cover that up with water and blend. Once it's done blending, you can either spoon the mixture right in the soil, however, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that for indoor plants because it can cause mold and stickiness. Or the other option is for indoor plants, you can strain your mixture in a spritzer and spray it in the indoor garden for an added boost. But it is perfect for your outdoor plants that have a lot of sun. But it is still worth noting that you should be careful, especially with indoor plants, when spooning the mixture right in your soil. The second plant food that I found to really work is this.
And it'll really help your plants to grow twice as fast.
Grab a blender and add 1 banana peel, 1/4 cup of coffee grounds, and 1 eggshell. Blend your mixture. You might want to add a little bit of water to soften it up. You'll pour your mixture in a little cup and begin to add small spoonfuls of your fertilizer right into your plants. This acts as a great source of calcium, magnesium, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and it's also a great source of micronutrients like iron and zinc. You can also dilute small spoonfuls in some water and then spray it on your plants.
That's better for indoor plants,
But just remember, if you are using this, make sure your plants have a lot of sun because the banana peels can attract certain pests or cause some mold. So this is primarily great for outdoor garden beds. But remember,
healthy soil means healthy plants.
and when it comes down to coffee, I often wondered if you could fertilize all of your plants with coffee grounds because I heard such mixed messages about using coffee grounds alone as fertilizer. So I tried it, and I found out that the best plants to fertilize with coffee are acid-loving plants like tomatoes, roses, citrus trees, strawberries, jade plants, violets, philodendrons, lily of the valley. But you want to be careful because if you're adding coffee grounds alone, you only want to add a little. It does a lot better if you add it with other beneficial ingredients like your banana peel or your eggshells. Now, the worst possible plants to fertilize with coffee are plants like cranberry, passion fruit, avocado, asparagus, mustard grains. Coffee grounds tend to increase the pH of the soil over time, causing excess stress to the plant and incorrect soil conditions that these plants truly need to survive. Adding coffee grounds with the other materials can help. Just make sure your plant thrives in acidic soil, and then coffee grounds are great to use. Since I got my answer about coffee, I also started wondering about just the eggshells as a fertilizer for my garden. I learned that eggshells can be used as both a fertilizer and a pest remover, and they're one of my favorite ingredients for my garden beds for every single one of my plants. If you boil some eggs, remove the shells,
But keep the shells for later.
pour it over both your indoor and outdoor plants, and then with the eggshells that are left, place them in your soil beds to act as a pest remover, as the sharp edges of the eggshells are not well liked by garden pests. What eggshells do is provide added calcium to your soil, and they help adjust the pH of your soil. They also help improve drainage and organic matter and act as a pest deterrent.
You can even use the shells as little seedling starter pots.
So let me know if you try this at home, but I highly recommend using eggshells, and there are many variables in the garden. Now, if the eggshells don't happen to work to remove your pests organically, and you find that any of these methods for fertilizing your plants bring bugs, you can use this concoction to get rid of them. Add a few drops of dish soap to a mini spritzer and dilute it with water. Add a few drops of oil to a little spritzer, close it, shake it up, and bring it outside to your garden. You can use it to spray your plants and have it act as a barrier around your plants. Nonetheless, this will help get rid of your pests organically. And if you add baking soda, you can even use it to get rid of any mildew that's on your leaves. Now, along the way, I also learned about an even better method that works amazingly in keeping small pests out of your garden. So if you want to keep small pests away from your garden for good and nothing has worked for you, try grabbing 2 cloves of garlic and ginger, place them in a blender, and blend it up with some water. Pour your mixture into a bowl, add some crushed chili peppers, fill that bowl up with some hot boiling water, cover that mixture, and steep it overnight. In the morning, you'll strain it into a spritzer and spray twice weekly over your plants. This method will help repel small animals like bunnies and squirrels. Another way to deter your pests in your garden is with orange peels. Instead of throwing them out, the peels actually emit a very strong citrus odor that small animals find very strong and unpleasant. The peels contain a natural insecticide called
D-limonene.
and that repels everything from slugs, ants, fruit flies, dogs, foxes, bunnies, squirrels, and more. It can also even help keep aphids away, which are very difficult to keep away in the summer.
I would know.
But put the peels directly in the soil, put them just above the soil, or add them to a spritzer, add water, and spray. And to help deter those small critters even more next to the orange peels, you can also use plastic forks to tell the little ones to fork off. If you grab a fork and place it in your plant, it'll act as a natural pest remover because the critters don't like the sharp edges of the utensils, and you can also use it to hold up your seedling.
Little plant stand.
So let your garden say fork off to the pests like chipmunks, ponies, squirrels. You can also use spoons or knives. Just place them around your plants. They'll grow really nicely. And don't forget about bottom watering. Bottom watering can be very essential for some plants, especially carnivorous plants like Venus flytraps, where if you water the top, it may drown them. So if you place your plants in a little bucket of water and let them soak up the water from the bottom up, they might actually end up growing nicer, faster, and better. Now, if you've never heard of basil for the garden, after a few months of gardening and using oranges and the forks, I figured out that small pests don't like basil, lemongrass, lemon balm, mint, rosemary, and dill.
So choose one or choose all.
And either place individual plants around these plants or take some leaves off of the plants and disperse them around the soil in your garden beds and around your potted plants to help keep the critters away. As unusual as it may sound, human hair works great as a natural fertilizer in the garden due to its high levels of magnesium. You can take some strands out of your hairbrush or even use your dog's hair or your cat or your horse and put it directly in your plants. It can offer structural support for your roots, and it can also help break up thick, clumpy healthy soil, and it's great to use in compost as well. As the human hair decomposes, it provides nitrogen just as natural gas-derived sources like ammonia do. But again, there are so many things that I think about when it comes to keeping my plants actually alive. These were my most used plant hacks that I've personally tried for you to try at home to grow the biggest, best garden you've ever grown. You can now unbuckle yourselves, and don't forget, we're on the prowl to buy a farm, buy some chickens, buy some ducks, buy some horses, and have an entire full-blown garden with animals and plants galore. So till next week, where we take the seeds from exotic fruits and try to grow them into full-blown houseplants, and along the way we use different fertilizers, plant foods, pest control methods, experiments. Next week I'm coming at you with 20 more. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to follow, don't forget to
Subscribe.
I'll see you next week. Don't forget.
I love you.
Stay tuned.